Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. I think it's time to talk a bit more about Jod Na Nawood, a very sketchy individual played by Jude Law in the new Skeleton Crew show. Spoilers ahead. Jod Na Nawood definitely fits the Star Wars character type known as the scruffy nerf herder. Actually, he's so sketchy he makes milder criminals like Han Solo and Lando Calrissian seem like upstanding citizens. And now because a man of his character is entrusted with the lives of 3 precious children and whatever the hell Neil is, we're obviously now concerned about who exactly this individual is, and we're gonna take a closer look at some of his more dubious statements, like his claim to being a Jedi.
You are a Jedi, right?
I never actually said that.
What? I knew it!
Well, he actually is kind of right about that.
You're
Hear that melody? That's the Skywalker theme. The music that plays whenever a Force-sensitive aligned to the light side takes center stage. This is important because we're going to touch on this later on in the video. So other than that theme music, just by demeanor alone and choice of profession, Jod Na Nawood doesn't seem like a Jedi, or is currently a Jedi at the least. There have been plenty of Force-sensitive individuals, plenty of Jedi who have basically gone into hiding after Order 66, but rarely do these individuals ever end up being criminals or the leader of gangs of criminals, like Captain Silva over here, or Crimson Jack, as the furry calls him. This is unless said Force user becomes tainted by the dark side like Balin Skull or Terran Malicos. But Jod Na Nawood does not strike me as a dark Jedi or a Sith or a dark side Force user at all. I mean, yes, he's a criminal, but this is a galaxy where the economy is smashed, you've had 2 massive conflicts, and so a lot of normal people have been forced to basically resort to crime. We're not justifying it, but that is just the reality of what happens when you have an impoverished society. Now, from an age point of view, Jod Na Nawood is probably around the same age as actor Jude Law, who, believe it or not, is 50 years old. Man, people really age well right now. I mean, 100 years ago, you'd probably mistaken Jude Law for a 12-year-old coal mine worker. Things were so much better back then, you know, family values and all. But yeah, let's say Jod Na Nawood is between 40 to 50 years old. With Skeleton Crew taking place in 9 ABY, this means that Order 66 happened 28 years ago, which means that Jod Na Nawood was anywhere from 12 to 20 years old when Order 66 happened and the whole galaxy turned upside down. So this is actually important because it's clear that Jod Na Nawood is Force sensitive, and so he would have been a Force sensitive child during the Republic era. You know, when the Jedi were still sending out so-called seekers to find every Force sensitive child in the galaxy. And here's the thing, they weren't just going around scanning people or using the Force or going to hospitals and taking a look at medical records. This, by the way, is why you should never give your DNA to some for-profit company that promises to reveal that you're like 2% Native American. The Jedi literally created an archive for all of these Force-sensitive children. It's not clear how exactly they did this. It could have been kind of like a Professor X Cerebrum kind of thing, or maybe they were just having Force visions and, you know, collecting all that information in one place. It should be noted that generally speaking, all throughout galactic history, there are only around 10,000 Force-sensitive individuals alive at one time. I think this is just a cap that's placed by the living cosmic Force. You know, it's a way to just make sure that society doesn't go crazy or that Force users start breeding a lot and just creating massive armies of Force users, which of course would create a huge imbalance. You kind of have to think of the Jedi and the Sith as almost the body's immune system. Like, too much of either form is going to be very bad for the overall body of the galaxy. Now, what is clear is that the Jedi jealously guard this information, this archive full of Force sensitivity, and naturally the Sith also wanted this information as well. You guys probably remember that heist that Cad Bane carried out during the Clone Wars against the Jedi Temple. At the time, he was working for Darth Sidious.
He is the keeper of the Kyber crystal, the data on which can only be read by holocrons.
What's on the crystal?
A list of every known Force-sensitive child in the galaxy. The future younglings. The future of the Jedi Order.
There was also a holocron with this information stored on it as well that was kept by Jedi Master Eno Cordova post-Order 66. It was important for Jedi survivors to keep this information out of the hands of the Empire and the fearsome Inquisitors that pursued Force-sensitive children and tried to turn them into dark side minions. You know, as bad as the Jedi were, the Sith and their lackeys were even worse, but because they were so evil, I mean, I almost worry about them less because everything they did was never really sustainable long term. Whereas the Jedis, adherence to cooperation and institutionalizing their belief systems made them actually far more difficult to kind of dismantle. So the second reason why the Jedi survivors wanted this information post Order 66 was they kind of had plans to reset the Jedi Order eventually. And of course, they were going to use all the names on the list to build up their ranks. But Count Kestis would eventually get his hands on the holocron and be given a choice over what he wanted to do with this information. Information that most likely included one specific name, Jod Na Nawood, or whatever his real name was when he was a kid. Now, Count Kestis had a really rough childhood. You know, he was brought up in the Jedi Order and basically orphaned like everyone else because he was taken away from his family. He was forced into this life of servitude, and as a result, he'd seen tremendous death and destruction before the age of 12 on the battlefields of the Outer Rim sieges. The poor kid then witnessed the death of his master, the only father figure he really knew, and he barely survived Order 66 afterwards, and experienced the rest of his childhood in fear and hiding. Count Kestis was a good kid though, with a solid head on his shoulders, and I think his negative experiences made him far wiser than your average gung-ho for the Republic type of Jedi. Count Kestis realized that maybe bringing a tiny baby into a monastic order and then committing them to that life is not the best thing to do. Sure, the Jedi could technically leave whenever they want, but most of these children were, again, essentially orphaned because they were removed from their family at such a young age they didn't even know them. And then they were indoctrinated into the Jedi way of life through a structured system and also pure pressure. Basically, everyone they knew was doing the Jedi thing, and to not do the Jedi thing would be seriously uncouth. And we're all impressionable when we're that young, and we're all vulnerable to the adults and groups that shape and organize our lives at that age. And unfortunately for a lot of Jedi, by the time they actually do get old enough to have their own opinions, their own desires, it's already too late for them. The dismemberment of their childhood, of what could have been, is permanent. Some hands, when dealt, you just can't get back. It's kind of disarming to think about it. And so Cal Kestis decides that he has no right to decide the future of all those kids on the holocron. He chooses not to involve them in what surely would be a deadly struggle against the most powerful political and military order in the galaxy. And that's okay. You know, let kids be kids, not cannon fodder in your weird force war. Let Jod Na Nawood grow up to be whatever the hell he is now. Cal Kestis ends up destroying the holocron so neither side can use this information, and I really do think this is the right move. It doesn't completely redeem the Jedi Order's terrible actions and, past mistakes, but it's definitely a step in the right way. Now, you might be thinking, Alan, oh, here we go again, you're being too hard on the Jedi, but I would argue that too many people give them a free pass just because we're told that they're the good guys. There are plenty of good Jedi, but institutions like the one created by the Jedi Order were clearly evil. I mean, this is the whole point of the prequels, and I think a lot of Jedi diehard fans miss this aspect of that series. Sometimes it's hard to see your heroes get taken down a notch, but I would argue once again, individuals who could still stay true to themselves even when the institutions they belong to crumble down are even more heroic than the people who can easily be a hero because that is what their leaders are telling them to do. Cal Kestis, I think, is far more mature and wiser than most of the Jedi that sat on the council in the last years of the Clone Wars. Being a Jedi is not about being dogmatic and adhering to the code the best. It's much more than that. It can't just be quantified by a set of rules, because rules and direction sometimes rob your ability to think independently or individually when it comes to each situation you're going through. Instead of memorizing rules about what's right or wrong, I think what's more important is if an individual understands the core of what morality is, why things are right or wrong. Being a Jedi is about that. It's about adhering to an internal moral compass that is not determined by some council of wise men, but by a true desire to make the world a better place. It's about being pragmatic and open-minded, not lazy, and taking a look at every situation you're involved with a lack of ego and clarity so that you don't make the wrong choice. Qui-Gon Jinn is a great example of what the Jedi could have been, and Mace Windu, despite his best intentions, is what we got. A stooge for a state and institutions that have been wholly corrupted. I've met quite a lot of religious and spiritual individuals, priests, rabbis, shamans, gurus, monks, all those kinds of individuals, and I've always enjoyed my conversations with them, but the people I've always respected the most were the people who really understood their belief system. Not like all the dates or the prayers you have to do or what you can or can't do, but like the reason why these stories are told and what they offer to the human experience. And a lot of these individuals, these religious leaders, these believers, they have this internal moral compass that allows them to always do the right thing no matter what the situation is. And that's why ultimately I trust individuals, not institutions. And I think when we look at an individual like Jod Na Nawood, he might not be a Jedi in a traditional sense, trained with the Order and given a lightsaber at a young age. But I think that really doesn't matter. Like, what makes a police officer? A badge, training, and a gun? Or just a desire to go out there and fight crime and shoot bad guys? That's a trick question. Don't become a vigilante, okay? But anyway, there's a reason why when Jod Na Nawood uses the Force, he's given the Skywalker theme song. Because what made Luke so special wasn't the fact that he was a Jedi. As a matter of fact, by the time he became a Jedi, the Jedi Order was really just gone. It was non-existent anymore, especially in its previous form. If you take a look at Luke Skywalker's training, he was hardly an institutional guy. I mean, he received like one lesson from Obi-Wan Kenobi before he died, and he hung out with Yoda for maybe a few days before he died. Most of his connection to the Jedi were through like ghosts and stuff. Luke was able to ultimately resist the dark side and succeed where so many other Jedi failed, not because of his training, but because of who he was as a person. If you think about it, he actually disobeys the Jedi. He disobeys Yoda and Kenobi by going to Cloud City, where he loses his arm. Luke succeeds in his journey because he ultimately was pure, and he believed in the redemption of his father. Luke ultimately acted out of compassion, even though no one told him to do so. Whereas almost every other Order 66 Jedi was after revenge, like Cere Junda and Farron Barr, and tried to destroy Vader, Luke was successful not because he wanted revenge, but because he saw something more in Darth Vader. He saw redemption, and by showing him this, Anakin was disarmed and disconnected from the dark side's grip. If you take a look at Jod Na Nawood, despite being a pirate, he seems relatively untouched by the dark side. And that right away strikes me as kind of odd because usually it's very hard and natural to fall into the dark side, especially when you're involved in a very violent profession that involves killing and, trying to prevent other people from killing you. But so far, we haven't seen Jod Na Nawood use the Force out of anger at all. This potentially means that he does have Jedi training. He understands the problem with the dark side, or he could just be a very chill person. When escaping the prison on Port Borgo, Jod Na Nawood uses the Force to mostly distract people and move things around. All in all, these were very mundane and not maniacal uses of the Force at all. He basically just distracts people. He's not really tapping into the Force's full potential. We don't see him doing any Sith lightning or even Force pushes, which is perfectly acceptable by most Jedi. He could also easily manipulate the children into believing that he's a Jedi with a classic Jedi mind trick. Or worse, he could have infiltrated the minds of these children and forced them to give him all the information on Ad-Atin that he could find. This type of enhanced interrogation is something the Sith and Jedi were both well known for doing. And he doesn't go there. Maybe because he's a decent person, or maybe because he's a weaker Force user. We're not really sure yet. I think with the Skeleton Crew, they are setting us up with some expectations, though, about Jod Na Nawood. Clearly, because of his pirate background, we're supposed to judge him and treat him as a sketchy and potentially malicious actor, who's only really after the treasure of Ad-Atin. But I think children are supposed to bring the best out of us, unless by us, I mean, like a human trafficker. And Jod Na Nawood's true character will come out while interacting and taking care of these kids. Because we don't really know this guy's backstory. I think there's a lot more to this very complex character. And if you take a listen to the only real thing he's said in this entire TV show so far...
The truth!
The truth is, I'm just like you! Okay? I'm lost! I'm alone!
It hints that maybe this isn't the life that he would have chosen for himself. It's possible that he is an Order 66 survivor. It's possible that he was orphaned. He grew up in a period of time that was very violent in the galaxy. Maybe his parents died in the Clone Wars, or maybe, something else happened where his entire path in life was derailed and he was forced to become a pirate. It's also possible that he's just been on the run from the Inquisitors because he is Force sensitive. Doesn't matter if you're a Jedi or not. If you think about it, the only people he shows his Force powers off to are children as of now. So it's not something that he flaunts around that much. This is what makes Jod Na Nawood's character so interesting, because it could really go in any direction. And again, I think this is what they're trying to do with the Skeleton Crew. This is where we're going to see a lot of development and reveals in this character. A lot of pirates are bad people, but sometimes we find ourselves in horrible circumstances because we don't have another choice, or because we're weak and that's the path we take. But as long as there's regret, there's also a road to redemption. That is kind of what Star Wars is all about. Except for Kylo Ren, fuck that guy for killing Solo. I wouldn't be surprised that by the end of this little adventure, Jod Na Nawood finds his potential as a, quote, Jedi, in the same way that Kestis does, or even someone else like Jars. So there you have it, guys. That is my theory about Jod Na Nawood. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. And as usual, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to Democracy.